December 16, 1944. The Ardennes forest is a frozen, silent landscape of dense pines and waist-deep snow. For the American GIs stationed here, the war feels like it's entering its twilight. The push from the Normandy beaches has been exhausting, but the German army is supposedly broken, retreating toward the Rhine. The Ardennes is considered a ghost front, a quiet sector where green divisions are sent to learn the ropes and battered units are sent to heal. But at 5:30 a.m., the silence is shattered by the roar of 2,000 German guns. This wasn't just a local counterattack, it was the start of Operation Watch on the Rhine, Adolf Hitler's final, desperate gamble to turn the tide of World War II. It would become the Battle of the Bulge, the largest and bloodiest single battle fought by the United States in its entire history. The Midnight Gamble. To understand the sheer audacity of this offensive, we have to look at the state of the Third Reich in late 1944. Germany was being squeezed in a giant vice. In the east, the Soviet steamroller was crushing its way through Poland. In the west, the Allies had liberated Paris and were knocking on the door of the German heartland. Most of Hitler's generals told him the war was lost. They advocated for a layered defense. Hitler, however, had other plans. He believed that the Western alliance, specifically the partnership between the Americans and the British, was fragile. He theorized that a massive, lightning-fast strike through the Ardennes could reach the port of Antwerp, cutting off the Allied supply lines and trapping 4 entire armies. He hoped this would force a separate peace treaty with the West, allowing him to focus all his remaining strength on the Soviets. The plan relied on 3 things: total secrecy, bad weather to keep Allied planes grounded, and speed. Hitler stripped his eastern defenses of their last remaining tanks and fuel, assembling nearly 300,000 men and 1,000 tanks for a blitzkrieg in the dead of winter. The Ghost Front breaks. When the German shells began falling on that freezing Saturday morning, the Americans were caught completely off guard. Intelligence had failed. Allied commanders had dismissed reports of German troop movements as mere defensive repositioning. They didn't believe Germany had the resources for a major offensive. The German assault hit like a sledgehammer. 3 German armies lunged forward along a 75-mile front. In many sectors, the Americans were outnumbered 5-1. The bulge in the title refers to the way the German line pushed deep into Allied territory, creating a massive protrusion on the map. One of the most terrifying elements of the initial push was Operation Greif. German commandos, led by the notorious Otto Skorzeny, dressed in captured American uniforms and drove American jeeps. They moved behind the lines, cutting phone wires, changing road signs, and spreading mass paranoia. For several days, American troops were stopping their own generals at checkpoints, asking them questions about baseball and comic book characters to prove they weren't German infiltrators. The stand at St. Vith and the massacre at Malmedy. The German plan required the capture of key road hubs. Without the paved roads, their massive Tiger and Panther tanks would bog down in the muddy, snow-clogged forests. The first of these hubs was St. Vith. The defense of St. Vith was a chaotic, desperate affair. American troops from the 7th Armored Division and the 106th Infantry, a green unit, held out far longer than the Germans anticipated. Though the town eventually fell, the delay was critical. It threw the German timetable into disarray, forcing their columns into massive traffic jams. As the Germans pushed forward, the brutality of the conflict escalated. Near the town of Malmedy, a motorized SS unit led by Joachim Peiper captured about 120 American prisoners. In a snowy field, the SS opened fire with machine guns. Those who survived the initial volleys were finished off with pistol shots to the head. Word of the Malmedy massacre spread like wildfire through the American lines. If the Germans thought this would break American morale, they were wrong. It turned the battle into a personal vendetta. The GIs stopped surrendering. They fought with a new, grim determination. The hole in the donut. Bastogne. While St. Vith was the first hurdle, Bastogne became the soul of the battle. Bastogne was a small Belgian town where 7 major roads converged. If the Germans took it, they had a clear path to the Meuse River. If they didn't, their entire southern flank was stuck. By December 20th, the 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, along with elements of the 10th Armored, were completely surrounded inside the town. They were outnumbered, short on food, low on ammunition, and lacked winter clothing. The medical supplies were almost non-existent. The conditions were hellish. Men lived in frozen foxholes, the ground so hard they had to use dynamite to dig them. Trench foot was as much a threat as German shrapnel. On December 22nd, 4 German soldiers approached the American lines under a white flag. They delivered a written ultimatum: surrender or face total annihilation by German heavy artillery. The acting commander of the 101st, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, gave a response that has since entered military legend. His official written reply to the German commander consisted of a single word: nuts. When the Germans asked for a clarification, an American officer told them, in plain English, go to hell. Patton's miracle. While the 101st was holding the line in the hole of the donut, General George S. Patton was performing what many historians consider the greatest logistical feat of the war. Patton's Third Army was facing south, hundreds of miles away. In the middle of a blizzard, Patton pivoted his entire army 90 degrees and raced north toward Bastogne. It wasn't just about moving men. It was about moving thousands of tanks and trucks over icy, narrow roads in the middle of a battle. Patton famously asked his chaplain to write a prayer for good weather. Whether it was divine intervention or a shift in the jet stream, the skies finally cleared on December 23rd. The Jabos, Allied P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers, swarmed the skies. For days, the German tanks had moved with impunity under the cloud cover. Now they were sitting ducks. C-47 transport planes began dropping supplies to the beleaguered paratroopers in Bastogne. On December 26th, the lead tanks of Patton's 4th Armored Division broke through the German ring. Bastogne was relieved, but the battle was far from over. The grinding winter war. The relief of Bastogne was the turning point, but January 1945 would prove to be even more grueling than December. The Allies now had to flatten the bulge. This meant attacking into the teeth of German defenses in the coldest winter Europe had seen in decades. This phase of the battle was a slow, agonizing crawl. For the infantrymen, the war was no longer about grand strategy or the liberation of Europe. It was about the next 100 yards. It was about trying to keep feet from freezing and rifles from jamming. The whitewashed German tanks were nearly invisible in the snow, and the forests were filled with tree bursts, artillery shells that exploded in the canopy, raining lethal wooden splinters and shrapnel down into the foxholes. By mid-January, the German fuel reserves, already critically low, ran dry. Abandoned Tiger tanks, the most feared weapons in the German arsenal, were found on the roadside simply because they had no gas. The Blitz had run out of breath. The cost of victory. By January 25, 1945, the original lines had been restored. The bulge was gone, but the cost was staggering. The United States suffered over 89,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed. It remains the deadliest battle in American history. To put that in perspective, more Americans died in those 6 weeks than in the entire Vietnam War's deadliest year. The German losses were even higher, estimated at over 100,000 men, and the vast majority of their remaining heavy equipment. Hitler's gamble had failed spectacularly. He had used his last reserves of manpower and fuel, and he had nothing left to stop the final Allied push into Germany. The back of the Wehrmacht was broken. 3 months later, Hitler would be dead, and Germany would surrender. The legacy of the bulge. Why do we call this America's greatest battle? It isn't just because of the scale, it's because of who fought it. This wasn't a battle won by brilliant maneuvers from the top brass. In fact, the high command was largely caught napping. This was a soldier's battle. It was won by the 19-year-old privates who refused to leave their foxholes when the Tiger tanks roared toward them. It was won by the cooks and clerks who picked up rifles to hold a crossroads for just one more hour. It was won by the medics' frozen hands and the engineers who blew up bridges in the face of the enemy. The Battle of the Bulge proved that the American army, which many German generals had mocked as soft and inexperienced, could endure the worst conditions imaginable and defeat the finest veteran divisions the Third Reich had left. As we look back on the frozen woods of the Ardennes, we see more than just a military victory. We see the moment where the American spirit was tested to its absolute limit and held.